So far, our programs have been very simple, so it's been real easy to find errors. But as we start to make more complex programs, it's important to know how to use a debugger. Most IDEs, don't forget that's integrated development environments, have built-in debugging tools. The advantage of using this debugging tool is that it allows us to control each step in the program, and we can watch the variables as they change. Let's start by setting a breakpoint in our last program, datatypes.cpp. It is helpful to enable the line numbering feature. If you don't see line numbers, go to Window, Preferences, General, Editors, Text Editors, and you'll see Show Line Numbers. By default, this is not checked, so click on Check Line Numbers, and then click Apply. Then click OK. We can add breakpoints in two ways. A breakpoint tells the computer when we want to stop and evaluate the variables. We can add a breakpoint in two ways. One is we can right-click on the far left in the editing window next to the line number. So let's go ahead and right before line number 10, let's right-click and say Add Breakpoint. It's going to bring up a breakpoint window, click OK. The second way to add a breakpoint is to make sure you have the line selected where you want to stop. So if I click on the second line of code here, the short num, and if I go up to Run, I can choose Toggle Breakpoint. At this point, you will see I now have two blue dots in the far left-hand column. These are breakpoints and where my program will stop when I'm running in debug mode. This allows us to manually take control of the program execution. Let's click on Run Debug, or F11. Before I can debug, I have to build the new program, so let's click on the hammer to build. Now I can click on Run and Debug. I'm going to click on Remember My Decision, and I'm going to say yes, I want to open the debug perspective. You'll notice we're now in a new perspective. In the upper right-hand corner, instead of being in C++, we're now in the debug perspective, which adds a few windows to our workspace. On the top right-hand corner, we can see the variables that we have defined. In the middle part is our program, and actually the highlighted line, which is line 10, shows where we're currently at in the program, although we have not executed this line yet. The debug actually stops before the execution of that particular line. We also have a new contextual menu bar that showed up. You can see right here are some of the debug options. We can resume, which will continue through the program to the next breakpoint. We can pause or suspend. We can stop. We can terminate the debug mode. We can step into or step over any of the statements. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the right-hand side in the top at variables. Notice all the variables have values, but they're not values that we set. The character variable for letter does not have the A yet. It only has a 0 and an end-line symbol, the \0. You can see that the other variables also have values, but they're not values that we set. It's just values that the computer found in memory. Let's go ahead and step into our program and keep an eye on the variables. If I click Step Into, do you see what happened in the window up here in the upper right? Letter now has the character A, which we know from our previous discussion is the ASCII conversion table tells us that little a is the integer value or decimal value 97. Let's step into again. We can watch short num go to the number 10. Int num is going to go to the number 575. Long num now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Step into float num now has the right value, double num, and finally string. Okay, now the season variable, which is a string variable, is actually made up of individual characters. At this point, all of our variables have values. Now we're going to go down to the next line where we actually print out the values. So again, if I step into, you'll see in the console window it printed out the A. I'm going to step into each one and watch the numbers get printed. When it gets to the return 0, that is the last statement in our program. This curly bracket is the last part of our program. At this point, the program will end. And if I go down to my console window, I can make this a little bit bigger and I can see all the values that got printed. Let's switch back over to our C++ perspective. These are the basics of debugging. We will continue to use the debugger as we get into more complicated programming.